This is In the Loop, and I am not Christian Bryant. He will be back next week. In the meantime, I'm Cody LaGrow, and you already know this show loves a good deep dive. And with the midterms tomorrow, why not make elections our focus tonight? Specifically, one issue around elections you've been hearing a lot from candidates over the last week.
Fundamental rights are on the ballot. Truth and facts and logic and reason and basic decency are on the ballot. Democracy itself is on the ballot. The stakes are high.
They're going after your right to vote and how we can, no, not a joke, mark my words. They're going after your right to vote and who's going to count the vote.
Our priority is making sure that just as our elections always have been safe and secure and accessible to all, that they will be again on Tuesday.
An AP NORC poll in October found that only about half of U.S. adults surveyed have a lot of confidence in vote count. It's worth noting, despite all the claims from the 2020 election, no actual evidence of election fraud has been found. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA, stated systems as a whole were very secure. Even after multiple investigations, audits, and recounts, no state election authorities found any evidence of fraud. Still, those allegations have remained a topic of conversation even 2 years later. It got us thinking, are other countries dealing with this? What is the conversation around election integrity elsewhere? To answer those questions, we called up a few of our friends around the globe to help us get a more worldly view, where past elections have sparked allegations of fraud, from opposition candidates to against the company Smartmatic, in charge of the electoral machines for the election. We'll start things off in Venezuela, where past elections have sparked serious allegations of fraud. Mary Trini Mena has more from Caracas.
The legitimacy of recent elections in Venezuela has been questioned not only within the country, but also beyond our borders. The opposition, the Organization of American States, and many other Western countries denounced the re-election of President Nicolás Maduro, saying it was fraudulent. Specifically, the ruling government has been accused of taking over dominant opposition parties, exiling and banning opposition politicians from running for office, and taking over control of the electronic voting system. Venezuela's new presidential election is scheduled to take place in 2024, and electoral experts are warning there's no guarantee of a free and fair outcome. Mary Trini Mena for Newsy, Caracas.
Thanks, Mary. Now we're heading to Brazil, where they recently had a presidential election. Outgoing President Jair Bolsonaro stoked fears of fraud leading up to the election, which is still having repercussions in the country today. William Denslow has more on their vote counting process from Rio de Janeiro.
More than 20 years ago, Brazil switched to fully electronic voting. That means that votes are then calculated by a computer and you get the result in just a matter of hours. We saw that during the recent election race between incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro, who was defeated by Lula in that presidential race. Now, the issue of Brazil's electoral integrity was questioned in the run-up to that race. And while after Bolsonaro was defeated, he didn't say whether he would contest the result on the campaign trail, he repeatedly questioned the integrity of Brazil's election system. He says that they're easy, these systems, because they're electronic, can be manipulated, and he says it's difficult to audit. Now, that has been very much refuted by many analysts who say that it is possible for these systems to be audited, even though they're fully electronic. We've also heard from Brazil's electoral officials. They say they have not seen any instances of fraud in this presidential race. William Denslow for Newsy, Rio de Janeiro.
Thanks, William. From South America, let's head over to one of the world's largest democracies, India. New Delhi correspondent Ishan Garg tells us how the country handles its elections.
It's the seat of power. India's parliament is the top lawmaking body in the country. Although it has two houses, it's actually the lower and more powerful house of parliament, where representatives are directly elected by the people. And the election process is as big as it gets. In the last general election held in 2019, more than 600 million people voted at more than 1 million polling stations to choose 543 representatives. India's national elections are largely considered free and fair. The voting is held through electronic voting machines. There's an enforceable code of conduct for the contestants, and concerns about foreign influence, unlike the US, are minimal. And while that's all good in theory, the reality on the ground can sometimes be far from ideal. Some areas in the country have reported goons occupying voting booths to secure votes for just one candidate, a phenomenon called booth capturing. Many activists allege that despite regulations, politicians also use the money to directly or indirectly buy votes. Much needs fixing here, like in many other countries. But for many Indians, an election is a celebration of democracy. Ishan Garg for Newsy, New Delhi.
Thanks for that report. Nigeria is also preparing for general elections next year. Ajak Mangut reports from Abuja on concerns about how credible Nigeria's next elections will be.
The election campaign season is underway here in Nigeria, and memories of past elections are clouding people's confidence in the process. Political experts say the credibility of the 2023 general election will depend on the degree to which citizens can vote freely without violence. The 2019 election, which gave President Buhari a second term in office, was disrupted by widespread violence, during which more than 600 people died. That violence also prevented many Nigerians from casting a vote. There were also widespread reports of ballot boxes being stolen and vote rigging. It was contested by President Buhari's main opponent, Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, who says he won the election, but results were manipulated. Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission says it's confident it's made necessary preparations for the 2023 elections. But the Commission's confidence isn't shared by many Nigerians, who say they have no reason to think that the February and March elections in 2023 would be much different than previous ones. Ajak Mangut for Newsy, Abuja.
Thank you, Ajak. Best of luck covering Nigeria's elections. They will take place on February 23rd of 2023. It's always good to get a perspective elsewhere and see how other countries are dealing with their elections.